the time now. That's excellent. Thank you for coming back. And if this is the first time you've been able to join us, you're also very welcome. Lovely to see you. So if you were in one of the earlier sessions, you may remember that I started in both cases with some facts and figures, and today's going to be no exception. So what I want to show you today in the way of facts and figures comes from the Bupa Executive Wellbeing Index, which was launched in September 2020. And when I first came across it, there were a couple of things that really fascinated me. And actually, they were partly instrumental in me writing this, which I think some of you will have seen. It's called Your Mind in Lockdown, and it's about the neurological effects of being in lockdown and, you know, what happens in your brain and what happens to your mood and your behavior and everything as a result of being restricted from doing your normal things. So what the Bupa Executive Wellbeing Index said at that time was that 80% of the executives who had been surveyed reported at least one symptom of poor mental health. So things like, you know, disturbed sleep patterns, low mood, lack of motivation, those sorts of things. 80% of executives said that they had experienced some of that. And that's not surprising, really, is it? Because, you know, this is 2020. This is when, you know, we've been through 2 lockdowns and, you know, the world had gone topsy-turvy. But the bit that was a bit disturbing was that 40% of those said that they were having difficulty admitting it and seeking help. So that's an awful lot of people, I thought, in senior positions who could potentially do with some help on their mental health, that were just not feeling comfortable to go and say, can somebody give me some support? So when the second edition was published last year, I was really interested to see if anything had changed. So I thought, you know, this is something that's really well and truly on the agenda now. Lots of people talk about mental health, people talk about mindfulness, they talk about, you know, the importance of a good constructive mindset. So I thought, you know, is anything changing? So let me show you the slide. And you probably won't be all that surprised to see that some things have changed, but not very much. So in the 2021 version of the Wellbeing Index, they're now saying 3/4 of executives have experienced at least one symptom of poor mental health. So that's 77% compared with 80%. So it's a little bit of a drop, but not a massively significant one. And I couldn't find the stats about how many people were seeking support, but there was lots of stuff about how people are actually taking responsibility and doing something about it. So 4 in 5 executives are doing something to improve their physical and mental health. So, you know, that seems like, you know, progress. 90% plan to make changes to their health and lifestyle. Now, I wondered about this, you know, this planning to make changes. Does that mean anything's actually going to change? So good that people have got the awareness and think it would be good to make changes, but, you know, have they actually made any? And then there's also a bit of a focus on organisational responsibility, with 2 in 5, so 39%, believing that organisations do have an increased responsibility to provide wellbeing support. So I thought that was quite interesting as well, that this has definitely become now part of what we see as a leader's role, and what we see as the role of an employer is that, you know, we're expected to provide some kind of support to further the well-being of employees. So I thought that was interesting, and it provides a good backdrop for this whole notion of mindset, mindfulness, and mental health. Now, as I've said before, if you're the kind of person who likes to just sit back and listen, you're in the right place. I'm not intending to make this an interactive session. I'm not going to, you know, look for lots of people to do lots of practical stuff. See you getting really comfortable there, Douglas. And so I'm just going to, you know, go through some information. If you've got questions, if you would like to put them in the chat box, then when I get to the end, then I'll go through and we'll spend a bit of time answering your questions, and we'll do that all in one block. And also, as I've said on previous sessions, and it's lovely to see that so many of you have done it, if you would please keep your camera on, that's great, because it makes a world of difference to me when I've got a screen full of faces to look at rather than just black boxes with names in them. So thank you for doing that, that's great. So I think one of the first questions to answer really is why do we think these things have become so important? Because there's no doubt about it, far more people are talking about mindfulness, mental health. People are talking about all of these issues in much greater detail, much more frequently than I can remember at any time in the previous part of my career. I think it's obvious that the global pandemic and the subsequent lockdowns have focused a lot of attention on well-being, not just mentally, but also physically. A lot of organisations have had to stop and take stock and think, what are we doing to keep our employees physically safe from infection, but also then what do we do about keeping them in a good space mentally when they're having to work from home, perhaps not in ideal conditions, when people are suffering from anxiety about family members, about their extended family, people have been worried about their future. This is kind of challenged everybody on so many different levels that most organisations have had to stop and take stock a little bit and think, are we doing everything that we could? But I don't think it's enough really to say this is an employer's responsibility. I think for all of us, we've also had to kind of stop and think and say, what am I doing to take care of myself? And I know there were times, during the pandemic, it was some fairly bleak times, I remember. And I remember thinking at one point, I'm finding this hard. I'm finding, every morning I get up and I have to sort of rearrange my head so that I can get on and do the things that I plan to do. And I thought, well, I'm fortunate. I've been through, years and years of training in psychology and NLP and lots of other things. And I thought, if I'm struggling a bit with this, there must be lots and lots of people out there who don't really know where to start to organize their mindset, to work on their thought process and so on, to keep themselves in a good frame of mind. So I think it's important that we all have some kind of strategies available to us, that when we notice that we're struggling a little bit, that we have something practical that we can do about it, because it can become a downward spiral. And I've spoken to a lot of people in the last couple of years who have said that they start to notice that their motivation's going down, that they're feeling a bit low, that they're not very happy. And then they think, well, I shouldn't be like that. I've got a good job and I've got a nice home to work from. I've got my loved ones around me. So, I shouldn't be feeling like this. And so then they add a bit more pressure onto themselves, thinking that what they're going through is wrong and inappropriate and so on, rather than being able to say, okay, I think there's a good reason for this. Now, what can I do about it? And, to be comfortable with the fact that none of us experiences life, always in a good place. Nobody's happy all the time. Nobody goes through every single day with everything going the way they planned it and having a marvelous time. And that, I think that's partly what life is about. I don't think life is supposed to be 100% wonderful. I think it's the light and shade that actually makes life enjoyable. It's the contrasts. It's the fact that you do have difficult days when things don't go the way you planned, that then when you have a great day and everything does work out, it's so much more enjoyable, because of the contrast with the not so good days. So these are the reasons why I think it's important that we look at these topics. Now, those of you that know me well will know that I do like to define my terms. I like to be clear that we all know what we're talking about. So I thought, let's have some proper definitions of what we mean by these things: mindset, mindfulness, and mental health. So for those of you that like to see as well as hear, here we have some definitions. So this is a definition of mindset that I liked, because it's nice and simple. Mindset means a set of attitudes or fixed ideas that somebody has and that are often difficult to change. So you recognise that as a definition of mindset. Now, we often talk about the idea of a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. Are we in a mindset that means that we're open to change and to development and to a shift of attitude towards something, or do we have a fixed mindset where we just say, right, this is the way things are, this is what I believe, and I'm sticking with it? And those two different ways of thinking about things. They have positives and negatives. There are times when it's really good to have an open mind, and there are times when it's good to be clear about what you think and to stick to that. Somebody said to me once, I always remember this, that it's good to have an open mind, but not so open that your brain falls out. That was a nice one. I don't know if you've heard that before. So mindset is just about thinking of, where is somebody's attitude and how does that then affect their ability to engage with something, or how does it affect the way that they perceive a situation or another person? Mindfulness then is the ability to be fully present and aware of your body, mind, and feelings in a way that creates a feeling of calm. So this is clearly something that is different from mindset. And often it's something that comes about as a result of some kind of daily or regular practice. So a lot of the sort of contemplative practices, like meditation, and also, sort of more physiological things like yoga and qigong and those sorts of things, often the result of practicing those activities generates that sense of mindfulness, that ability to be fully present, and at the same time being aware of everything that's going on for you, but not sort of reacting and responding in a big way to things, not being sort of caught off balance by something that might have been unexpected. And so mindfulness is a word that lots of people have heard and have used, and we hear a lot about mindfulness training and so on. I think there's two ways of using it. Some people use mindfulness as a way of describing the activities that one would do in order to achieve that feeling of calm and presence. Other people use the word to describe that feeling of being fully present and being okay with it. So, it gets used in a couple of different ways. And the third definition, this is the World Health Organization's definition of mental health. Mental health is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. That last bit struck me as quite interesting, because we don't often think about communities. When we're talking about mental health, you get focused on the individual and you think, how is that person doing? Are they coping? Are they stressed? Are they being able to discharge the stress? We don't often think about the community element to it. And I think that's actually very significant. There's a great book called Lost Connections. And the name of the author eludes me. He's a journalist. And it's about a search for a cure for depression. And the author himself was diagnosed with depression as a teenager and had been prescribed various different antidepressants over a period of time. And at some point in his adult life, he kind of decided that he wanted to understand more about what was happening and why he felt the way he did, and what he could do about it. And the book sort of charts his journey around the world to lots of different experts in different fields. And one of the things that comes out of this is that the notion of lost connections is that when we feel disconnected, then we are more likely to become depressed. And so we have mental health problems as a consequence of being isolated. And that's not just isolated from other people, although the notion of being part of a community and of contributing to a community was really high up on the list of things that help people overcome depression, or indeed avoid it in the first place. But it's also about connection to self, about being fully aware of what's going on for you. In a lot of cases, people who have busy lives, they spend a lot of time racing around, doing stuff, talking to other people, making things happen, taking care of others, and don't often have the opportunity just to stop and be with themselves and really be aware of what's going on. And so that's another form of connection. So I recommend the book if depression is something that you're interested in, or you have family members, or indeed yourself, you have some history of it. It's a great book in terms of looking at a completely different focus. It is about looking at the system that you are part of, rather than saying what's going on inside my brain and how can I fix it. It's more about saying what is the environment that I'm giving myself to live in, and how can I enhance that in a way that enhances my mental health. So I think if we look at those three definitions, mindset, mindfulness, and mental health, I think the common themes going through that, for me anyway, are that they all have the common element about having choice and control over your thoughts and feelings. That I think, if we have the sense that we're not at the mercy of our feelings, that we don't know when we're suddenly going to get a wave of emotion that, gets in the way of us doing something. If we find that our head's full of stuff that we don't really want to be thinking about, but we can't get rid of it, then, these things are always going to be detrimental. But when you get to a point where you have a sense that you're sort of in charge of what goes on in your head, then I think, that can be really, really helpful. And so if we start with mindset, one of the things that I often say to people come to NLP training is that, we look at the way that your perception of reality is created. And you're probably all aware that, there's a big world out there and people make sense of it in different ways, that the world doesn't look the same to every single person. And that the meeting you were just in didn't look the same to everybody who was sitting around the table or, on the screen and so on. That we all have our own individual experience of what goes on in the world. And that's largely because the amount of information that's available to our senses is way more than our brains can process. I mean, the research that I read most recently said that the amount of information available to your senses is something like 6 billion bits per second. And yet, at the level of conscious awareness, your brain processes something like about 135 bits per second. So that's 6 billion on the outside, 135 on the inside, which means that what happens as the information comes in through your senses and gets, processed by your brain, a lot of it gets filtered out. I mean, most of it gets filtered out. So it's not surprising, really, that two people sitting in the same meeting can come away with a different idea of what's been agreed and what's been decided. Two people watching the same movie have a totally different experience of it. I'm sure you've all done that, and you come out of a movie and you say to the friend that you went with, "Oh, that was great, wasn't it?" And the friend goes, "Yeah, it was okay," And you think, well, weren't you watching the same thing that I was watching? And that's because you're experiencing it in a different way. So often what I will say to people is that what we don't tend to realize is that we have a choice about how we experience things. And that choice comes from our use of language. So when people say things like, "Oh, I missed my train this morning, it's obviously going to be one of those days," they're expecting that the whole day is now going to turn out differently than they expected. Yeah. Whereas if you choose to talk about that in a different way and you say something like, "Oh, my train was delayed, so the day didn't quite start the way I intended," you're leaving it open that the rest of the day can still go in a way that's positive and constructive for you. And it's these little things about how we use words that make a difference to how we experience things. And also, of course, how other people experience things. So, the person listening to you will have a different sense if you're using words that suggest things are still okay, than if you do this, "Oh, it's all gone horribly wrong" sort of thing. Yeah. So that's one of the ways that we get some control over what goes on in our head. It's about the way we talk to ourselves about what's happening. Because there isn't a one-to-one relationship between an experience and language. Or to put that another way, you can always describe something in a different way if you choose to. and we always have choice, but the trick is remembering that we've got choice and then exercising it. I can remember a particular evening when I'd been training in central London, and we'd finished a little bit earlier than anticipated. And I remember thinking, "Oh, this is great," because the following day I was doing a job in South Wales. And so I was looking at spending my evening on the M4, basically. And so I got away from my course a little bit earlier than anticipated, and I'm in the car and I'm driving along the embankment, and a cyclist pulled up next to me at the lights and tapped on the window and pointed out to me that I'd got a flat tire. So I was very fortunate, actually, because a parking space miraculously opened up and I was able to get off the road and stop causing a problem to anybody and park and phone the AA. And I distinctly remember having phoned the AA, being really tempted to sort of phone home and have a little tantrum. "No, you'll never guess what's happened to me," And then I remember thinking, this is my training cricket kicking in, it's going to be a long evening. I need to conserve my energy. and instead, getting out the car and going in the boot and finding my overnight bag and getting out the novel that I'd been reading and just sitting for a little while and reading and being calm. No. Actually, I was really fortunate because they came and rescued me within about 20 minutes or so. So it was nowhere near as bad as it could have been. But I remember that moment where, for one glorious moment, the training did kick in, and I remembered I had a choice, and I didn't give in to the urge to make myself feel even worse by having a bit of a tantrum. So mindset is about exercising that choice, and it takes practice. And it's not something that you can just go, right, I'm now going to choose what I think and feel. It's something that you do have to be mindful of. And this is where I think the mindfulness comes in, because if we kind of adopt mindfulness practices, so-called, often what that means is undertaking activities that bring you into the present. It's doing things that make you aware of what's going on in the here and now, and allow you to let go of your anxiety about what might be coming up later, or fretting about what happened yesterday. It's a way of just being in the moment and letting everything else disappear for a while. Now, some people have moments of this in the normal course of their day, just because of the way they choose to spend their time. So it might be if you have a dog and you walk the dog a couple of times a day, it might be that you spend time walking somewhere that you enjoy, that you engage with your dog's enjoyment of being outdoors. And, dogs are great for that, aren't they? Because they love everything. It doesn't matter what you offer a dog, dogs always just love everything. Going for a walk, excellent. Oh, we're going to play in the park, brilliant, fantastic. Dogs are always upbeat. So if you let yourself engage with that, that's a great way to kind of be in the moment and let go of all that other stuff that's distracting you. Some people find it, if you play with small children, it's very hard to be stressed if you've got a baby in your arms, unless the baby's stressed. Fortunately, if I've got a baby in my arms, I can usually give it back to somebody. I don't have any of my own. But it's the same kind of thing, that if you're fully focused on another human being, then that will tend to get rid of all the noise. Now, for a lot of us, we need to do more than that. If you've got a very busy life and you've got a lot of stresses, then sometimes you do need to specifically take time out to practice some form of detachment from everything else, to come back to self, to come into the present moment, and to let go of everything else that might be distracting you. I learned to do this. I was only 17 when I learned transcendental meditation. And this is sort of 20 minutes twice a day, where and people say to me, oh, is meditation, you kind of learn to think about nothing. And to begin with, I think I thought that's what I was trying to do. And I got a bit frustrated that, I just couldn't seem to not think about anything. And what I realized over a period of time, that what meditation is about, as far as I'm concerned, is about learning how to let go of thoughts. So the thought comes into your head, you notice it, and you let it go again. Now, the more you do that, the further apart the thoughts come, put it like that. And if I haven't done my meditation for a while, it's like there's a bit of a backlog of stuff that needs to be processed. Sometimes I sit to meditate and the things are coming thick and fast, and it takes a while before I find any stillness. But I think a lot of people give up on meditative practices because they think, I'm not succeeding. But actually, every time you let a thought go, you are succeeding. And of course, the more you do that, the more your mind gets trained to the idea that we have a choice about whether we engage with a thought or not. And that spills over into everyday life. So that you then, and if you know somebody who meditates a lot, that they have this nice kind of air of serenity about them usually. And that's usually because they've learned to let go of thoughts. They've learned that they have a choice. They've learned that they're not at the mercy of everything that pops into their head, that they can park something and come back to it later, that they can choose to see something in a different way, or from a different perspective. So if that's not something you've ever explored, I would really encourage you to give it a go. There's lots of different types of meditation, and there are also there are apps that you can get that will do guided visualizations that have a similar effect to doing, you know, meditative practice. So it's definitely worth exploring some of that if you feel that this is something you need a bit more of in your life, a bit more stillness, you know, and a bit more choice over what's going on in your head. You know, you'll never know until you give it a go. I would say from personal experience, it made a massive difference to me. And, you know, and I can tell when I haven't been doing enough, and I need to get back to it and give myself a bit more time, because it's easy to think, oh, I've got a busy day today, I haven't got time to do that. My experience, I don't know, give me a thumbs up if you would agree with this, is if I make the time to meditate, the day never seems as busy as if I don't. Yeah. Yeah, I'm getting some thumbs up. Yeah, absolutely. So you know what I'm talking about. So I think then if we have a choice about mindset and we engage in mindfulness practices, then I think the end result of that is going to be positive in terms of mental health. So I have a sense with mental health that the phrase gets used a lot at the moment to mean poor mental health. You know, and people sort of say, oh, you know, we need to talk about mental health. What they mean is, you know, we need to talk about the fact that people are stressed and depressed and unhappy and so on. They don't mean we need to talk about actual mental health. And I'm not sure many people really know what mental health is. You know, I think people, when you say that phrase, a lot of people think about, you know, depression and anxiety and mental health problems, rather than, you know, how do you know when you are mentally healthy? And, you know, you might know for yourself, how do you explain it to somebody else? Because I think there's a lot of different things involved in this, and some of them are things like, you know, your level of energy and motivation. So do you get out of bed in the morning, you know, with a sense that you're going to do some good stuff in the day? I mean, you know, I am not an early riser, and I'm not one of those people who kind of springs awake and jumps out of bed and, you know, goes, wow, what a great day I'm going to have. You know, I'm not like that at all. But that doesn't mean to say that you know, having woken up slowly and gradually and eventually hauled myself out of bed, that I don't then look forward to the day. You know, it's just that I start slowly and I start fairly late. And, you know, I'd love to be one of those people who wakes up at 5 a.m. full of the joys of everything, and, you know, has sort of done half a day's work before I've even had my breakfast. You know, I'd really quite like to be one of those people. And I think part of being mentally healthy is being able to accept who you are and how you are, and, you know, not comparing yourself too much with other people. Because I think that's one of the things that can drag people down, is when they start comparing with other people and then they find themselves wanting. So I think another indicator of mental health is actually, you know, feeling okay about who you are. And along with that goes, and I think this is a really good indicator, is, do you feel pleasure when other people succeed? If you do, I think that's a really good sign of mental health. I think if you're in a bad place mentally, you see other people succeeding, that can be a trigger for lots of unpleasant stuff going on in your head, you know, like sort of, you know, comparing yourself, or, you know, feeling hard done by, or, you know, lots of different things that can be triggered by that. So when you're looking at people around you, you know, when you're sharing success stories, notice how people respond to it. And if people are finding it hard to really enter into the spirit of celebrating somebody else's success, that might be an indicator, you know, that they're not in a great place personally and they need a little bit of extra help. So, you know, those are some of my sort of indicators of good mental health. And you know, there are lots more. There's, you know, how motivated are you to exercise? You know, what are you eating and drinking? Because often when somebody's not in a good place mentally, then it's hard for them to do the kind of daily rituals of preparing food and going out for a walk or going to the gym or playing their favorite sport and that kind of thing, that there tends to be less energy for anything really. And so these also can be indicators. So you know, the other side of that is when you're mentally healthy, then that's when you have the energy to take care of yourself, kind of paradoxically. You know, that's when you have the energy to say, right, you know, I'm going to do my fitness regime, I'm going to cook a meal that, you know, I know is good for me and is nutritious and healthy and so on, rather than, you know, phoning up Deliveroo or whoever else you might phone up on the day when you really can't be bothered. So I think one of the things that I'd encourage you to do would be to have a little think about what are your personal indicators of good mental health. So, if you're going to do a little sort of check on yourself during the day or during the week, what would be the things that you would check for to say, how am I doing today? How's my mental health? In the same way that, I don't know if you check your physical health, but if there's something wrong physically, it probably screams at you, that you feel pain somewhere, or you feel discomfort, or something doesn't work the way that it should. And then that's fairly obvious. But do we have the same awareness for our mental health? So I'd encourage you to have a think about that. What are your key indicators that would let you know either that, yeah, you're in good shape, or, there's something going out of balance and maybe you need to take extra care of yourself because of it. So these are all aspects of, how we get control over what's going on in terms of our thoughts and feelings. I think when people come to me and say, how do we get started with this? I think the first thing really is you've got to take responsibility. I talked early on about employers taking responsibility and seeing that very much as part of the employment contract now, is that we look after the well-being of our employees. I think it's important that individuals also take responsibility. That we say, there are things that I can do. And, some of that will be things that you do every day. Sometimes some of it will be things that you just do when something's not quite right. And I'll give you an example of my personal examples from the first lockdown. Maybe it was the second lockdown. It goes back to 2020 anyway. I was in quite a difficult place actually, because I'd split up with my partner November 2019, and I'd moved house. So I was living in a place where I hadn't met the neighbours. I just didn't know anybody there. I'd been really busy work-wise during December, January and February, and also the early part of March. And then suddenly we're in lockdown and, staying at home. I'm not allowed out except to go for a walk once a day. I don't know my neighbours. My family are scattered around a bit. My mum's half an hour away. She's 86. I need to keep an eye on her, but I'm not allowed out to do that, And so, it was a difficult time, and I don't mind admitting that. And one of the things that I started doing was that when I found myself getting anxious, getting upset, feeling sorry for myself, all those things that can easily happen, is I would go out for a walk. And the rule I made was that I would walk until I felt better. So I wasn't allowed to come home until I was coming home in a good frame of mind. And that might seem a bit brutal. And I did do quite a lot of walking in pouring rain at one stage. But what it meant was that I was giving myself space to process whatever I needed to process, to think through things that were upsetting me or that were causing me stress, figure out what I was going to do about it, and then come home with a plan of action and a sense that I was back in control. It also meant that I wasn't sitting around the house feeling sorry for myself. And having just moved there, I didn't really have a lot of happy memories there. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't just fill this new home with memories of being, anxious and uncertain and uncomfortable and, feeling a bit down. So that was one of the reasons why I did that. And it worked. And the interesting thing that you might like to know is that what happened is that the length of time it took me to feel better got shorter and shorter. It's like at the unconscious level, my mind and body were kind of going, okay, right, we better get our act together here, otherwise we're going to be walking in the rain for an hour. So the amount of time it took to get back into mental equilibrium shortened over a period of time, just by having that I'm not going home until I feel in a good frame of mind. So, I'm not saying that would be something that would work for everybody, but it's that kind of thing where you take responsibility, where you say, okay, right, I realize I'm not in the right state of mind. What am I going to do about it? And for some people, it'll be, go get on the exercise bike or go to the gym and lift some weights, or, other people, it'll be, I'm going to put my favorite music on and listen to that and let that take me somewhere different. We all have our different ways of doing things. That's just, that's what worked for me. The point is taking responsibility, of saying this is under my control, I can do something about it, and not allowing ourselves to just slide into feeling sorry for ourselves and making it worse. So what else would I recommend? I'd suggest that you learn to meditate or something similar, as I said. I think learning NLP will really help. Of course, I would say that, that's what I do. And it's interesting because a lot of people who go through NLP practitioner training, when I've asked them at the end of it, what did you really get out of this? A lot of people say things like, well, I came because I wanted to learn to be more influential. I wanted to learn to manage my team better, or to build better relationships with customers, or, that sort of thing. It was all about other people. And I've been surprised how much benefit I got for me. And when I dig a bit deeper and say, so, what's happened for you? Most people say something to the effect of, my life's just got a bit easier. And that's not because, the problems went away. It's because they had more confidence in their ability to handle things, that they had different ways of thinking about some of the problems that might arise, and weren't wasting energy on fruitless tasks. And so in that sense, life got a bit easier. That the energy that was being expended was actually bringing a return in terms of results. And the third thing that I would recommend, if you're really serious about taking care of your mental health, would be to be selective about what you feed your mind. So if you're a news addict, challenge yourself. Because the media love to tell a bad news story. And if you sit and listen to the news on the radio, or you put the news on the TV, especially one of the all-day news channels, you can end up thinking the world's a pretty horrible place. So be selective about what you choose to feed your mind. And that's not just about the news. It's about, are you watching a lot of TV programs that are about violent crime? Have you noticed, if you flick through the TV guide of what's on, especially in the evenings, I think we're obsessed with crime. There are so many TV programs that are, police dramas, detective shows, reality TV, caught on camera, traffic cops. So everybody seems to be obsessed with crime, and even documentaries about crimes that happened in the past. Oh, let's dig all that up and reconstruct it and talk about what happened. Is that good for your mind? I leave you to make your own choice about that. I know it's not terribly good for mine. I know if I watch too much of that kind of stuff, it really disturbs my sleep. I find myself dreaming all sorts of horrible stuff. And it can also come down to what kind of books do you read, what music do you listen to, have you got favorite music that you listen to that's got really negative lyrics, and you find yourself singing about how hideous the world is and how nobody loves you, and again, is that really what the words you want to be feeding yourself? I'm not saying never do these things. I'm just saying, look for balance. Make sure that, that for every kind of, suspense, thriller, action movie where loads of people are getting killed that you watch, that you also watch something a bit gentler. There's a lot to be said for a rom-com. So that would be my third thing. So 3 things of, how to achieve mindfulness, mental health, whatever you want to call it, would be, first of all, take responsibility. So accept that you can do something about it. Secondly, learn some important skills, learn to meditate, or, learn to do yoga, or learn some NLP, whatever it is that's going to work for you. And then, be mindful of what you're putting into your head. So those are the things that I wanted to share with you. I think I've gone on a bit longer than I intended to, and I apologise for that. Does anybody like to ask me a question? Oh, thank you, Susan, for putting the details of lost connections in there. Yes. So, any questions? Anything you want to ask? I stunned you all into silence.
Transcendental meditation.
Yes.
That's quite a specific term, transcendental meditation. I'm not sure what. I know meditation. I've got an Headspace app, and done meditation before, and hypnotherapy and all that. But where does transcendental come into it in terms of? Is that just a name that's given to the general collective term of meditation, or is there something specific?
No, it's a specific form of meditation. It's the type of meditation practiced by the Maharishi, who was a figure in the 60s who led part of the sort of peace movement and so on. So it's a brand name, if you like. It's also known as TM technique. And the transcendental bit comes from the notion that when you still the mind, you can access deeper levels of consciousness that will eventually bring you to a moment of transcendence. And so yeah, it's a particular form of meditation, which will be rather different from the sort of like the headspace stuff, where you're getting input from the outside that helps you to relax and to calm the mind. This is totally self-generated, and it's done by the use of a mantra, a meaningless word. There are other forms of meditation that I've learned. There's a kind of there's a form that comes, I think, mostly from teachings of yoga, which is about focusing on your breathing. And that's very much you kind of, you feel it all in your body rather than having to do something in your mind. And then there's also a form of meditation that I learned as part of my study of Hawaiian Huna, which is known as Hiolani, which means meditation on the light. And that is about paying attention to the light that you see, when you close your eyes. Very few people see total blackness. You see patterns of light. And this form of meditation focuses on that. So interestingly, those of you who are trained in NLP, you see there that we've got different representational systems taking the lead in different forms of meditation. So I think it's good to experiment with different things and see what works for you, see where you get the greatest results, because it isn't a one size fits all, and different forms of meditation will work differently for each of us. Thank you for the question, Doug. Anything else? Anybody else want to ask anything? Okay, right. Daniel, what NLP techniques do you recommend for a general mental health maintenance? Oh, what a great question. I could say all of them, but that wouldn't be very helpful, would it? So I think there's a couple of things. On a very practical level, I think the well-formed outcomes pattern is really good in terms of getting you to focus on what do you want and what's under your control in the situation. Because I think, when we're having a hard time, it's very easy to focus on the stuff that we don't want. It's very easy to get caught up in analysing all the problems and figuring out, why has this person behaved in this way that's caused this problem for me? And, worrying about that. Whereas when you ask yourself the question, what's my outcome? That's actually the first step to taking responsibility, I would say. So at the point that you find yourself in a disagreement with a client or something, and something's going badly wrong, rather than getting caught up in the emotion of it, when you stop and say to yourself, what's my outcome? That puts your mind in a different place. It puts you back in that sense of, I've got some choice here. And also the well-formed outcomes pattern helps to focus your attention on the things that are under your control and that you can make happen. And therefore you're not wasting energy on things that are never going to come to fruition. So on a very practical level, I'd say that's a good place to start. When you look at more advanced things, there are things like timeline therapy, which we use to get rid of a sort of backlog of emotional stress and problems. But you can also use that as a daily maintenance. So you can go back through the day and apply the timeline therapy processes to it, so that you're diffusing anything that happened during the day that you might otherwise bottle up and fret about. So there are a whole range of different things that you can do. Learning state management, learning how to anchor states and have some choice over how you feel in the moment can also be very helpful. And there are people who practice NLP who say, well, if you know how to anchor states, you never need to feel bad about anything ever again, because you just anchor positive states. I think that's a bit of a mistake, because I think, if something is causing you stress, I think it's appropriate to give that some attention at some point. But if you're in an important meeting with your boss or with a key client, you want to be able to park those feelings and come back to them at a time, when it's appropriate for you to explore them more. So I hope that helps, Daniel, and I hope you're going to come and finish your practitioner training this year so that I can teach you the rest of the range of skills. Okay, anything else? All right, well, I will finish up with my...
Hold on, Alan's speaking, but he's on mute.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Thanks, Doug.
I apologise. I was actually answering without... What I was saying was, no, are there any more questions? I said, no, that's been really good, thanks. But
thank you.
I was talking to myself, really. But thank you. It's been very, very good.
My pleasure. So
you flashed something up at the end of the previous one that I didn't have time. I had another meeting I had to go to, unfortunately. But it was some sort of subscription thing or something.
Oh, so yes, let me do my little commercial break at the end. Then let me put the slide up. Thank you for asking, Doug. So I've done the same thing, and I've skipped through all my slides without showing them. Right. So this is what you're talking about, I think. So if you want to get started learning NLP, I mean, obviously, yes, we've got courses, we've got one-day events you can come to, but if you want something you can do, in the luxury of your own home, I've put together an NLP starter pack, which is just £24, including the VAT. And this is good, because I really want people to take this up. I think you can make such a difference to yourself with some of these basic techniques. So what it includes, in essence, there's a whole section of some of the basic NLP things, the things I would teach in the first couple of days of an NLP course, things that you can do for yourself and experiment with and get some results with, almost straight away. In total, there's 22 videos. They're all between about 5 and 10 minutes. So, I'm not talking about hours and hours and hours of watching stuff. But enough, I think, to give you information that would be useful. There's a couple of audio clips as well. They're slightly longer. And then, so there's a program called Your Brilliant Mind, which is about the process of taking in information from the outside world, filtering it through your own internal filters and creating your perception of reality that then informs the way that you react and respond to things. That's a set of 8 videos, again, between 5 and 10 minutes, taking you through different aspects of the model. And that includes a free coaching session, which I've also included in this package. It's just an opportunity for you at some point, to get on a Zoom call with me, ask some questions, give me some feedback if you've got some, and also, if you want to have a little bit of experience of NLP style coaching firsthand, if there's something particular that you'd like to address in that way. What else is in there? Oh, it says one module from the Use Your NLP program. The Use Your NLP program, I originally designed as a revision program, but one of the modules is about the well-formed outcomes pattern that I referred to earlier. And I often say to people, you can transform your whole life with the well-formed outcomes pattern if you take it on and you really use it. So I've included that, because I think it's really valuable. And all the way through, I've tried to answer the questions I think you might have if you're just getting started learning NLP, and a sort of narrative to guide you through and say what's in each section. So £24, there's the link. It's all hosted in the Brilliant Minds Online Academy. So all you need to do is, if you put that link, I think Mary's going to put that into the chat box for you so you can click straight through, is you kind of, you set up login details so that it's personal to you. And then all of the information that you put in, if you answer some of the questions or you sort of store information, then it's all there for you to go back to. So you get your kind of your own personal version of it. Any questions about any of that? Oh, thank you, Mary. I've got that in the chat box. Oh, and thank you, Alan.
Signing up as you speak.
So, sorry, Douglas, what did you say?
I said, I'm signing up as we speak.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. There might not be too much in there that's brand new to you, but then it's quite a lot of years since you did your practitioner training, isn't it? It's always good to refresh. Yes. So I have a question for you, especially those of you that have been through all 3 of these webinars. Is there anything else that you would have liked me to have covered that we haven't talked about? You know, if I was going to do some more sessions, you know, is there anything else that you would like to know about? Yeah, go ahead, Alan. Yeah.
Specific applications. It has been great. I must say, just for information, both my wives, were not concurrent, went through NLP training. One in the 1989, one far more recently than that. And I have tended to be put off NLP by very glib people telling me how wonderful it is for selling. And that automatically just raises a barrier for me. And so you know, on a shorter, and I accept these are 30-40 minute things, I would like, I think, more examples of use, if that makes sense. Okay. I'm just downloading the
yes
as well.
And I wonder if I might call on those of you who have done your NLP practitioner training to answer Alan's question on my behalf, because I think, you know, you might be able to kind of, you know, give more life to it in terms of, you know, what has it done for you in specific terms. Anybody would you care to help me out with that? Because if I get started, you know, there's so many things I could say. Do I have a volunteer?
I don't particularly like being evangelical about NLP. And I don't like people who come off it and I'll tell, oh, you know, this is amazing. But it is, you know, I guess it depends where you are in your life. But where I was at that time, I get it was like 20 years ago or something.
Yeah.
And I look at the 20 years since and I think, amazing, I'm glad I did it. And, you know, without going into details, yeah. And I'm back, I'm thinking, what else could I do again? Because there's a lot of times I've lost a lot of the practical knowledge. And I was actually thinking recently of maybe sharing the ideas with others, not becoming evangelical, but maybe having, you know, sharing ideas with people about what it was that I went through, in a way that I could, you know, sneak it in there without preaching, and so hence I'm kind of trying to do that.
Thank you.
Does that help?
One of my hesitations about being too specific is that sometimes when I tell people some of the things I've done with NLP, they don't believe me. And sometimes that does more harm than good, really. But let's think of some really practical things. So I have a client in mind who found it difficult to talk on the phone. She was chief executive of an engineering company, and she said, I know that when I look down my plan for the day, anything that requires me to make a phone call, I put off doing it. Now, you know, you might say, come on, you're chief executive, pull yourself together and get on with it. You know? And you know, that's one of the ways people succeed in life is that they just pull themselves together and get on with it. But if you're doing something that constantly causes you a bit of stress, then that takes a toll. And so I think probably all we did was a collapse of anchors. and it got rid of some kind of negative association that she had with making phone calls. To the extent that then subsequently, looking down the plan for the day, things that needed phone calls got done just as quickly as things that needed emails or something writing, or so that's a real tangible example, and that same pattern, you can use for all sorts of things. Anything that puts you in a state you'd rather not be in. One of my examples from my past was being manager of a team that didn't want me as their manager. They were all twice my age, and most of them were men. And it, it used to be a real trial to me to chair our quarterly meetings. And so, being able to manage my state in that made a huge difference to me. It's probably stopped me killing one of them. Anybody else got any examples? I think, Daniel, were you going to offer something?
Yeah, so probably the one that I use the most would be the break state. It's super simple. You just kind of, if someone's getting really wound up, you just get them to stand up and kind of shake it out, and it just kind of like resets them. But I actually use it in conjunction with the lab profile training that I did with you. So I use that a lot. My team's grown a lot, and I use it in interviews. And so the break state goes along with that very well, especially when they're talking about like a situation that was tricky for them in work. Other things that has been really useful is, not that we did it on the bit of the course that I've done, but having looked further in your book.
Really good. That's what the book's for.
Yeah. The problem framing thing is really useful. So where I've had team members that have felt like they're working perhaps on technology that's not so cutting edge, they're just fixing issues with it, and they want to be working on the next greatest thing. Well, actually sort of being able to help them reframe that to see that, they're still developing useful skills, they're still enabling us to continue selling that product and things like that. So those are two sort of examples where it's really helped.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I suppose my question for you, Alan, would be, what sorts of things are you doing in your life where you'd like a sort of a different end result than you're currently getting?
That's a good one.
You're still on mute. You need to unmute yourself, Alan.
Apologies. Sorry.
It looked fascinating.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm that. No, it's unfair to say I'm not that comfortable sharing, but I think I might bore the living daylights out of you if I were to share that here. But suffice to say, I am curious. How's that?
Yeah.
I make a living as a coach. Have done for the last dozen years or so, and I'm looking, I suppose, to expand my what I do, how I do it.
Well,
and
yes, any coach will find NLP
a
great addition.
Yeah, and also to feel more successful about what I'm doing, which is probably the most important thing I've said.
Yes. Yeah, well, I think any coach would find NLP tools a great addition to your existing toolkit. Maybe we can tempt you to come to a taster day. And
I'll see. The other problem with that is I'm situated the other side of the Irish Sea, so there are practicalities, but that shouldn't put me off.
Excellent.
I'll stay in touch.
Yes, do. Yes. Excellent. Well, it's 2:30. I think I've somewhat exceeded the time frame that I intended. I'm happy to answer any more questions if anybody else wants to ask me anything. Otherwise, thank you very much for being here. It's been lovely to spend the time with you again, and keep in touch. And let me know if there's anything else that you'd like me to include in future sessions. Okay. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Oh, you can invite us to future sessions then, Diane.
Sorry?
Are you going to invite us to future sessions?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, there'll definitely be some more going on at some point. Yeah.
Okay, good. Excellent. Speak soon.
Okay, take care. Bye. Ah, Neil.